that people can be able to do that. Now, you have an interesting point about how you'd rather see that taking place through regulation, through the courts. But the thing about lawyers is it's interesting. This just proves that he is willing to buck special interests, because this is something that you got to be careful with the category of lawyers. I did a lot of campaign finance research in this book, and a lawyer ain't just a lawyer. And what you'll find between, for instance, in campaign finance between Edwards and Obama, because Edwards used to catch a hell of a lot. And I'm really not a front man for John Edwards. I was just sort of intrigued by how pro-labor he was willing to be at the caucus campaign. But when you hear this a lot about that, well, he's just beholden to the lawyer. But you have to do the research to actually, it's not enough to go to the Center for Responsive Politics and look up the dollar numbers from the legal profession. What you have to do is you have to go deeper, you have to dig deeper and go to the list of contributors and find who the particular law firms are. And what you find with Obama is multinational, corporate, globalization types of oriented firms. And when you look at an Edwards, what you see is trial lawyers, who a lot of them are making a lot of their bread and butter on representing lower and working class people in class action lawsuits. Reagan did go beyond just, Obama did go beyond just liking Reagan's political skills. He praised him repeatedly for embodying a sense of horror at the so-called excesses of the 1960s and the 1970s. And he's playing to a type of consciousness and a type of part of the electorate, particularly in the independent sector. You know what that means? You know what those excesses were? And he knew what they meant. Feminism, civil rights, labor strike activism, and anti-war activism. He was, I think, playing to a kind of ideological sense, and on lies, which I don't have time for, public financing, which he said he would be in that system if he could find a willing Republican who wanted to do it. Braidwood claimed to have passed worked heavily on and passed a bill to regulate the nuclear industry after a new radioactive leak in Braidwood outside Joliet. Complete fabrication and fault. Spoke up, identified himself repeatedly with I saw this again and again in Iowa, with the workers in Galesburg, Illinois, and how they were being abandoned. And the New York Times went out there and interviewed all these union guys. They said Obama does nothing for these people. NAFTA, and the big one, and I am done now. The one time I got so pissed off that I walked out of my house and down to the Obama office on Summit Street in Iowa City. Was the flyer that came into my mailbox that said, "Support the movement to stop the war. Join the anti-war movement by caucusing for Barack Obama." It was one of the great deceptions, and it was critical in winning the Iowa caucus. And utterly false, and I'll be happy in a further question to tell you why.
Okay, follow-up question to John.
Iraq. Since we're on Iraq. Revealing quote, John, interesting quote on page 47. You go, anti-war critics were disappointed by Obama's failure to lead a crusade against the war in Iraq once he was elected to national office. However, quixotic, am I pronouncing that incorrectly? Quixotic stands are not Obama's political specialty. He is far more interested in finding pragmatic solutions, not public grandstand. Do you really want to so automatically caricature calling for principled opposition to a criminal, colonial, and brazenly imperialist and monumentally illegal and mass murderous war like the invasion of Iraq as calling for a quixotic crusade and as empty Rand standing? Sort of, I wrote my notes here. Hello.
I didn't say empty grandstanding. I said public grandstanding.
Public grandstanding.
I think grandstanding is very important.
Would you care to elaborate on the details of how Obama's more than merely failed to undertake a principled opposition to the war, but actually embraced, embedded it to the extent that when I got that mailing in my mailbox, I was compelled to walk out my front door and chew out this poor, nice 20-something white liberal kid from Iowa City. Very bad afternoon.
Well, Obama was against the war in Iraq, and he's not the kind of anti-war activist that a lot of progressives want him to be. The out of Iraq now, the stop the war immediately. Again, it was the situation in 2005 and 2006 and 2007, 2008 that standing up against the war in Congress and trying to stop it was grandstanding. It was very good, it was very important grandstanding, but it wasn't going to end the war. There was nothing that Barack Obama was going to be able to do as senator to end the war in Iraq. And that's just a pragmatic reality. Now, should he have, would I have liked him to be a public grandstander against the war in Iraq? Yes. I think it would have been much better if he had taken a more forceful role. But again, I was trying in the book to explain who Obama is, and he is not the person who's going to lead that crusade. And the reason why I think he's important to be president is that he's the type of president who is not going to get into that dumb war to begin with. Not that he's going to immediately pull out all troops, or that he's going to take this crusade as a politician and lead, in many ways, a lonely fight against the war in Iraq. So that's who Obama is, and I think again, you know, he's very different from a lot of the other Democrats who submissively went along with war to begin with. That doesn't mean he's by any means perfect on this, but he is someone who has that credential that I think you have to take seriously. That was so rare among politicians in 2002. Let me ask you a question about McCann. One of the things you said earlier was this idea that running for president doesn't matter, and that what Obama should be doing is creating a different political culture instead of being president. And I'm really puzzled by that, because I think who the president is really kind of important. If you notice, a lot of things happen or don't happen in this country because of who the president is. And as the example of Reagan showed, and even the example of Bush showed, the president, who he is, affects our political culture. And so I'm wondering, do you really think that Barack Obama should not have run for president? That what progressives should do is just give up on elected office and start?
Yeah, I actually agree with Adolph Reed at the end of near the end of the primary season. It struck me that Glenn Ford and Adolph Reed were right. There were no discernible. That there were no. Oh, was it my turn to talk?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think they need you to speak louder.
Glenn Ford. I agreed with a number of black left writers and other left writers that by the end of the primary season, there were really no discernible, relevant, meaningful ideological distinctions between Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, and that they were, in essence, for all intents and purposes, ideological twins. Actually, to be honest with you, in the primary campaigns, Hillary ran something marginally, but something to the left of Obama, not on foreign policy, but on domestic policy, particularly on housing issues and some labor issues. Kind of interesting. Yeah, and well, that's right, because she wasn't. He had to be fought to be inclusive, to say everyone ought to be in a health care plan, and things of that nature. So I could absolutely see absolutely nothing fundamentally with it, any programmatically, ideologically different with the Hillary Clinton presidency and Obama presidency. But I agree with Glenn, and I think with Adolph Reed too, that actually that Hillary had become the lesser evil within that narrow spectrum by virtue of the fact that the progressive community, when she got in, would still have understood the necessity to stay autonomous and to fight and to have big protests and big demonstration. They had her connected into the power structure and the power elite in a way that didn't just co-opt everybody and put everybody asleep, whereas Obama had really masterfully, he had money to do it and the personnel to do it with David Axelrod. So, and quite frankly, his race was a kind of racial shorthand that came into play that helped, and his name, helped feed the illusion that he was much more progressive than he was. Obama had a kind of capacity, and this seems to have been borne out, to stand down the real politics that matters beneath and beyond the candidate-centered electoral extravaganza. I hate to say it, but I really see it in Iowa City. People have really gone to sleep in a way that they wouldn't have with Hillary in it. I'm quite convinced of that. I had the strangest conversation with people.
Can I just follow up on that? Just to